Before we get started, this video has been a very long awaited request by many of the Subscribestar bros. Yeah, this is actually a really famous movie that a lot of you guys probably watched growing up. And yeah, it's 100% something I have a lot of nostalgia for as well. So let's get this video going before we take too long. I just wish we had more time.
Let me ask you one question. Is your money that good? Will it buy you forgiveness? Do you think that it could? I think you will find when your death takes its toll, all the money you made will not buy back your soul.
Man on Fire. Yeah, this is one hell of a movie, and kind of a fun rabbit hole to fall into. So Man on Fire is actually the 2004 remake of the 1987 film of the same name, starring Denzel Washington, Dakota Fanning, Mickey Rourke, Christopher Walken. Yeah, you get it, there's a whole bunch of people here. It follows a former CIA Black Ops agent named John Creasy as he travels to Mexico to meet up with his friend Paul, who has made a life there in the country. While Creasy is just sort of drifting, dealing with immense guilt from his actions while in the CIA and alcoholism, Paul talks him into taking a job as a bodyguard for a wealthy family's young daughter, Pita. Her upbeat and positive nature clashes with the more closed-off and traumatized Creasy, but the two eventually form a bond, with John realizing that she is his chance at redemption for everything he's done, and unfortunately she's kidnapped by a cartel, meaning all hell breaks loose. So the setup to Man on Fire, really the whole story, is really familiar. It's actually a pretty typical revenge story. Main guy has something bad happen to him and his loved ones, and he works his way through the criminal organization, torturing and killing any poor bastard that gets in his way. What makes Man on Fire stand out, however, all comes down to style. It's a cliche story that's done, putting it very simply, extremely well, and it actually makes sense when you realize there's more going on than you might think. You see, Man on Fire is actually based on a novel, Man on Fire, by A.J. Quinnell, which came out in 1980. Now the movies, honestly, and the book has some major differences. In the novel, the story actually takes place in Italy, and the criminals who kidnap Pita are part of the mafia. Creasy himself wasn't former CIA, but instead he was part of the French Foreign Legion. Now, the 1987 film is closer to the book in its own way, putting the story back in Italy, though still changing Creasy to be former CIA, much like in the 2004 film. I guess both movies were worried that audiences wouldn't understand what the French Foreign Legion was, and wanted to simplify it since former Black Ops CIA agent is a reliable enough trope for what the story needs. The ending is also closer to the book, compared to the 2004 film, which goes off in its own direction, though not in a bad way. Scott Glenn plays Creasy in the 1987 film, and honestly, he was not a bad pick for the role in the slightest. He's able to embody that empty husk vibe that the character needs, along with the obsessive drive to find Pita, now actually named Samantha, once things hit the tailspin. I also kind of like how Scott Glenn looks in the beginning of the movie. He doesn't look like a Black Ops agent, he looks like just some accountant guy, which makes sense, because a lot of former special forces from that era, yeah, they look like that. They're not supposed to look like action stars, they're supposed to look very unassuming. There's also a bit of a almost Max Payne type flavoring with his internal monologues. Yeah, Creasy gives these throughout the film. More than once I kept thinking to myself, there's no way Remedy wasn't aware of this movie when they made Max, because they can feel similar more than once.
And so, that's how I ended. A stiff in a body bag.
Now, of course, everyone quotes how the 2004 film inspired Max Payne 3, but the 87 movie had some elements that tickled that spot in my brain as well. Scott Glenn can sound a lot like James McCaffrey at times. It's pretty uncanny. The similarities actually start tapering off between the 87 movie and the book as it goes on. A lot of the opening is the same, from Creasy helping Pete to get better at track and field, and the actual kidnapping is pretty much word for word from the book, but it starts skipping over a lot of the kills, and there's an element that they avoid that I won't spoil for now. All I'll say is that the 2004 film is closer to the book in a few different ways. So you have a mishmash between the 80s film and the 2000s film where both have elements of the novel, and you kinda need to watch both if you want a full picture of what was intended. Man on Fire is a story that balances two halves. One is a character drama about a man who feels as if his life isn't worth living, and that he's damned to hell, finding a chance to regain his humanity. This young girl giving him that shot at redemption he never thought was possible. The second half is a bloody and at times downright disturbing revenge thriller, showing what happens to a guy that saw his chance at a better life and have it be snatched away right in front of him. There's a lot of emphasis on Creasy's skill set. He was a damn good commando before just getting burned out and falling into depression, and you see that full wrath come out after Pete is taken from him. The story emphasizes she was the one thing giving Creasy a reason to keep going. Without her, he's just a ghost of a man, and that plays into the action, able to get to anyone, anywhere, and be absolutely terrifying in the right situations. It just sells the vibe that the gangsters really didn't understand how badly they fucked up taking PETA, because Creasy doesn't just burst into a warehouse with a shotgun. He has all sorts of different tools and tactics at his disposal. One of the most famous scenes in the 2004 film is when he kidnaps a guy and shoves a bomb up his ass.
That's what you have in your ass right now.
And yeah, that's taken from the book. It sounds ridiculous and over the top, but it's actually one of the most tense scenes in the movie. Creasy is a character that operates off cold, matter-of-fact logic. If he knows you know something, he's gonna get it one way or another. A large aspect of Creasy as a character is that he already views himself as evil. He's already damned, and PETA was his one way of saving his soul. So after she's gone, he unleashes all that hate onto the men responsible. He accepted he was a monster a long time ago before the story even began, so he's not gonna pretend to be the better man in the situation. It's selfish vengeance, but you're fully on board because it's justified and these guys need to die. This is something the 2004 movie addresses more than once, while the 87 film keeps it under wraps, especially with how they changed the circumstances around PETA's kidnapping. Now that's spoiler stuff, so I'll hold off for now. Instead, let's talk about the technicals of both films and how they contrast each other. The 87 movie has a more grounded style to it, aiming for that late 80s sort of neo-noir visual. It's gritty, unafraid to show the blood flow, and it looks great. They show off how Italy is honestly just a beautiful country. The music is pretty understated, not that it was bad, but a lot of it is pretty forgettable. Despite taking place in Italy, you don't really hear any of that spice in the soundtrack. There's one or two moments where you can hear someone sing in Italian, and it is nice. But in that, it's pretty familiar dramatic music movie score, some bombastic orchestra, a synth song here and there. It's not really the focus. By contrast, the 2004 movie does a lot of things differently, from the music to the look. The 2004 film leans heavier on that early 2000s grit that films like Black Hawk Down had. Now, City of God was actually cited as a visual influence for Man on Fire, and yeah, that makes a lot of sense with how it looks. But granted, this was a pretty common look for movies from around this time period in general. Personally, I think it still holds up even after all this time later. It looks great. You get scenes of these put-together mansions that are very clean and very obviously aiming for that more classic Spanish romantic style, and then you have the dirtier, much more squalor areas of Mexico, hinting at the idea that the danger that was lurking in the story was always there, they just did their best to ignore it. The music is honestly pretty underrated as far as I'm concerned. It definitely steps away from the safe trappings the 87 film did. Yeah, there's still pretty familiar film score music in more than a few places, but it's willing to experiment around. Since the story takes place in Mexico, you can hear Spanish guitars mixed with a more psychedelic style for the soundtrack. There's remixed versions of licensed songs such as Blue Bayou, which plays during one of the more depressing scenes in the film, along with more 2000s era songs. Like you hear an electronic version of Requiem for a Dream. The actual song is apparently Juiced by GMS, but it's literally based off Requiem for a Dream. You also hear Nine Inch Nails more than a few times, which makes sense as Tony Scott, the director, is a big fan of them, and Trent Reznor was brought on as a music consultant, once again fitting that more experimental style that bleeds into the whole movie. There's also a lot of actual Mexican songs, slower paced, more emotional tracks that play during heavier moments. They're very fitting and really boil down the vibe of what Man on Fire is supposed to be. It's a ball-busting, gritty action movie, but it's also a character-focused drama that explores a tragic man going down a tragic path. But there's an aspect of Man on Fire that's probably its most famous: the editing. The 2004 film is famous for having what's known as MTV-style editing, intentionally looking very rough and unconventional. A ton of freeze frames that can happen in the middle of a shot, quick flashbacks to scenes that happened previously to a certain point. Sometimes it'll subtitle specific words and dialogue to emphasize that it's important to remember. Speeding up and slowing down footage, it can wash out certain shots or change the color to almost seem like a VHS tape glitching out. More than once, it can feel like the TV itself can be broken, but it's intentional in how it uses it. Creasy in the story is mentally broken by his past and has issues connecting with the rest of humanity, so the 2004 film uses the style to basically simulate the disconnect. There's a reason I name dropped Max Payne 3 at the beginning of the video, because, yeah, it took a lot of influence from Man on Fire. Not just for the story, being about Max trying to rescue a woman kidnapped by a violent gang in the Brazilian favelas, but it takes the visual style wholesale, down to the visual noise that shows up sometimes. It's a style that can divide people since it does make it hard to see what's happening at times. But personally, I love the look of the movie. It makes it stand out from the pack, and once you get what it's going for, you can definitely appreciate it more. Man Man on Fire is a very gritty story, being matter-of-fact with how it handles violence and brutality, and the visual style emphasizes this, looking downright disgusting at times. It can seem like broken news footage or a snuff film, which is fitting considering how ugly and dirty it makes the underworld of Mexico seem. You feel uncomfortable in multiple ways, and the movie keeps this consistent once the dive into the underbelly begins. Another thing to mention is the acting in Man on Fire is stellar. Now, I actually really like Scott Glenn's portrayal of the character, seeming like this husk of a man only brought to life by Samantha's presence. But yeah, the 2004 movie blows it out of the water. I mean, it definitely helps the cast is stacked from top to bottom with great actors. Denzel Washington as Creasy, Christopher Walken as Paul, Mickey Rourke, Dakota Fanning as Pita, one of the more talented child actors from that time period. You even have that one lady that was in the first Silent Hill movie. I'm not kidding, that's literally her. Anyway, you also have more obscure actors that were only really well known in Mexico, like Giancarlo Gianni, who is actually implied to be the same character he played in Hannibal, since he makes reference to doing investigative work in Italy. You also have Jesus Ochoa, who has appeared in a lot of great stuff. You get the point, the cast's very solid. But of course, I mean, it goes without saying, the obvious standout is Denzel Washington as Creasy. This is easily one of his best roles hands down, which is saying a lot since the guy is practically Hollywood royalty considering his career. But Creasy really was a character that made him stretch his wings, and you can see every ounce of what he's capable of. On paper, the guy's a pretty cliche character, traumatized Black Ops agent that doesn't really want to get close to anyone, but Denzel's performance gives the guy an insane amount of depth. Pretty much every emotion is displayed in some form of another, from his closed-off depressed side, contemplating suicide and feeling as if he'd disappoint everyone in his life, including God, to a more laid-back and even cheesy side, letting his guard down and simply able to enjoy the people around him. Even in the scenes where he's consumed with rage, you see there's more to the guy than just a singular emotion. He can be downright sadistic, acting playful with his victims and doing everything he can to get into their heads. And when he's done playing around, you feel this ice-cold chill. He really seems like he's about to kill a man. He's able to balance a lot of different tones with Creasy, and his chemistry with Dakota Fanning is something that really sells the film. As much as the 87 movie is a well-done thriller, ironically, one of the aspects it kind of fumbles is Creasy's relationship with Samantha. As important as she is to the story, it just kind of rushes through a lot of the bonding the two have. There's some great scenes, like when she's finally able to break through to the guy when they talk about history, or when she compares him to Lenny from Of Mice and Men, but you never really get hit with the feeling that Creasy really has this unshakable bond with Sam. She's kind of just the girl to save. By contrast, the 04 movie nails the relationship between Creasy and Pita. You really feel Creasy sees her as his chance at redemption. This girl means the world to him and basically sees her as his own daughter. She is the reason he's alive. And they have a ton of small moments in character banter that's able to sell to the audience that this is a real connection the two have. So when she's kidnapped, the audience really feels that Creasy's entire world has collapsed. The only thing he wants is to punish these men, and he gets downright diabolical with it. But before going any further, let's put up a spoiler warning for the people that have never seen Man on Fire. I highly recommend it. It's a phenomenal movie, one of my personal favorite. Definitely give it a watch before going any further. You will not regret it.
Hey guys, Saul Goodman here. Before going any further into the video, just wanted to point something out that Loli missed. In a blink and you miss it moment, you see that the 2004 version of Man on Fire references Creasy's history with the French Foreign Legion. It's very quick and never addressed again, but it is there. Just had to point that out since it flew under the radar during the production of this video.
Man on Fire, at its core, is a very tragic story. It's about a broken man given a chance at a new life, only to have it snatched away, forced to go back to his old nature to get justice. And the two films are different takes on this very traditional setup. The 80s film is a slow-paced thriller that's more subtle with a lot of its elements. The 2004 film is more bombastic and, ironically, actually closer to the book in its own way. The original film was directed by El Chorraque, I don't know how to say his name, he's French, a French filmmaker that used it as his English debut. While he kept the basic premise of the film, a lot of the beginning is kinda close to what the novel is. It deviates pretty hard, come the second half especially. The remake was directed by Tony Scott, a filmmaker with a decades-long career from the 80s all the way to the 2010s. He actually was a fan of the original novel and was going to take the reins on the 80s film before he had to drop out to the studio not feeling like he had enough of a reputation, eventually handling the remake a full 17 years after the original came out. And he took far more elements of the novel. Some scenes are almost directly taken, though the ending is considerably different. You see, the original novel is part of a series. Creasy's character was essentially Quinnell's version of almost like Jack Ryan or Reacher, a character that stumbled into various situations and adventures. So the novel ends with Creasy faking his death and assuming a new identity. The 80s film ends the same, with Creasy under a new name able to meet Sam after he rescues her. Well, the 2004 film has a completely different ending, something we'll get into later, since it's a mindfuck to people who've probably only seen one version or another, because this does apply to both. Now, the setting was changed to Mexico due to the nature of the time period. The novel took place in Italy during the 70s, a time period full of political violence and organized crime. Kidnappings were extremely common. Well, by the time 2004 rolled around, it was a different story. Italy stabilized itself, and it would have been harder to sell the idea. Tony Scott fought with the studio, saying he would only put the story in Italy if he could make it a period piece. This obviously wasn't what happened, and instead they took influence from the rough shape of Mexico, where cartels and kidnapping rings are a problem even to this day. They even based the main villains of the film off an actual kidnapping ring that was active in Mexico at the time. Daniel and Aurelio Lopez, the Earlopper brothers, due to their signature of cutting the ears off victims to ensure the families they were serious. It was so dangerous the studio dealt with threats from cartels on numerous occasions, threatening to kidnap Tony Scott and Denzel numerous times, to the point they needed to hire extra security, which is pretty ironic. Still, the film, despite being closer in spirit, does have differences between itself and the novel. Honestly, all three versions of the story can feel completely different from each other in more than a few ways. Creasy's best friend in the book, Guido, is a native-born Italian that joined the French Foreign Legion after the fall of the Nazis and liberation of Italy. He retires and opens a bar where Creasy ends up visiting him. Both films, 87 and 2004, ignored this detail, having both men be Americans and former CIA. Now, at least the 80s film kept the detail they fought in Vietnam together, but even then, they made it seem like they fought together for the entire war. In truth, Guido was only there for the conflict between the French and the Vietnamese in the 50s. Creasy was the one who stayed around for the entirety, then leaving to go fight in the Bush Wars, which is where his burnout starts to set in and causes his depressive spiral. The 80s film implies that Joe Pesci's character, now named David, does own the bar, or at least some form of it like a cafe, but it's not really explained, and to be fair, it's not really the point. The 2004 film renames him to Paul, and he lives in Mexico, providing escort work for executives crossing through Juarez to El Paso and vice versa, basically acting as a bodyguard. Though it's performative work, which even he comments on.
I ferry them back and forth. They think I'm John Wayne.
Creasy also has some backstory changes between the versions. As stated, neither film addresses the French Foreign Legion, instead leaning on him being a Black Ops agent for the CIA. He did do that in the book as well, but it was as a mercenary hired by them instead of being part of the American military. Also, the 87 film has Creasy be from California, when he was from Tennessee in the book. Now, the 2004 film never actually addresses where he came from. He claims to be from New Jersey in a scene, but that might have been a lie considering the context. The 87 film also never touches on the detail that Samantha's father was one who organized the kidnapping, hoping to trick his insurance company to pay off his mounting debts, but the 2004 film does adapt this. You get the idea. Each version of the story has some major differences between each other. Well, something that both the 87 and 2004 films share is what actually happens to Peta. You see, in the book, she dies. Like full-on raped and murdered by the kidnappers. Yeah, it's grim. Creasy isn't able to save her, and he just dedicates to avenging her. This is obviously a drastic departure from the version most everybody knows, that Creasy is able to save her in time and return her to her family. Even the 80s film did this. Now, that one also has him fake his death in order to escape the mafia's sights, which is the same thing as in the book, but he visits Samantha at the end, confirming she returned safe. The 2004 film's ending is the version everyone is probably familiar with. Creasy is critically wounded during his revenge quest, made worse by the injuries he sustained trying to prevent the kidnapping in the first place that he refused to let heal. And the story ends with him bleeding to death, content that he was able to save Peta. This is actually a twist in the story. You see, the first attempt to save Peta ends in disaster. Someone ambushed the drop where they were meant to leave the money, and all of the brothers' men are killed, including Daniel's nephew. In retaliation, they claim to have killed Peta. The film sticks to this idea for a long time. It does seem like they adapted the idea from the novel, even having a fake out during the nightclub scene where one of the goons working for the brothers claimed that they have the girl, but it's revealed to be a separate young girl that was kidnapped later. But no, the ending reveals she is still alive. Now, the whole ending is a radical departure from the novel, and not just because Creasy for sure dies. You see, I mentioned the villains of the film are based off the Earlopper brothers, an infamous gang in Mexico that was one of the bigger kidnapping gangs around the time the 2004 film was made. Well, in the story, Creasy's able to track them down. Aurelio and Daniel Sanchez. Daniel operating off the mysterious moniker of just The Voice, since that's all anyone knows about the guy. He's just a voice on the phone giving orders. You see, in the original novel and even the 80s movie, Creasy's able to do a lot of damage to their operation, but they do establish the Mafia is really powerful. They have a lot of resources and can actually hit back at Creasy. Well, with the 2004 film going with the idea that this was literally the only reason Creasy had to keep living, it essentially had Creasy double down on that. The 87 film and the novel has him want to live again, and he does try to find a way out of the situation, while 2004 Creasy basically wants to tear the whole fucking thing down whether or not he makes it out alive, even arriving at Aurelio's house. Yeah, one of the brothers' houses. He takes both him and Daniel's pregnant ex-wife hostage, calling Daniel on the phone and terrorizing him, threatening to torture his family to death if he doesn't reveal his location, even forcing him to listen as Creasy blows Aurelio's hand off with a shotgun to show he was not kidding. This is where Daniel reveals that Peta is alive. They plan to sell her off after the failed ransom, but now that he's desperate, he's willing to trade for his own brother. Under the condition, Creasy lets himself die as well. They agreed to the deal, and the film ends with Creasy riding off with what's left of Daniel's men, thankfully dying before they could torture him. Before you think that means Daniel gets away with everything, don't worry. You see, one of the reasons Creasy's been able to rampage through Mexico without any consequence is because there's a federal agent that's sympathetic to his cause, Miguel Manzano, who works with a local journalist to feed him information and stay out of his way. He's another character adapted from the novel, and he basically plays the same role. Oh, I didn't see anything, I didn't hear anything, but he's doing things I want him to do, so fuck it. Miguel has been trying to crack down on both The Voice and the gang of corrupt cops in Mexico City that caused the shit show at the ransom, La Hermandad, the Brotherhood. Technically, it is the same organization, as La Hermandad members work with The Voice to assist in kidnappings, but they also try to steal the ransom money before The Voice can receive it. The supposed leader of La Hermandad is a guy by the name of Fuentes, who is actually the leader of the anti-kidnapping division for Mexico City. Still, it's a situation where the law turns a blind eye for the most part. They fully understand why Creasy is as ruthless as he is. A young girl was kidnapped and supposedly murdered over senseless greed, so they simply let what happens happen. Even the journalist, a woman by the name of Mariana Guerrero, is quietly accepting Creasy's methods. They all know the situation is a shit show, so why get in the way of the guy actually making progress dealing with these assholes? It also leads into an interesting point about Man on Fire. You see, a large part of Creasy's character is his guilt. He's a man burned out by war and bloodshed, hating himself and thinking he's essentially abandoned by God, or worse, that he doesn't deserve redemption.
You think God will forgive us for what we've done?
His depression is so bad, he even attempts suicide, only saved by what seems to be a literal miracle. The bullet he tries to shoot himself with simply doesn't go off. His time with Peta helped him overcome this guilt, giving him the chance to see life was still worth living and he could be a human again, all around becoming a much happier person and able to put his demons to rest. Well, after Peta is kidnapped and supposedly killed, those demons are dragged right back to the surface. It's really not an exaggeration to say that Creasy is downright evil during his revenge spree, taking his time to make sure the men involved with the kidnapping all suffer. And the guy is just downright cold-blooded, willing to use any tactic he can to get to each one involved. And when he gets his hands on them, the shit they go through is just downright unpleasant. One of the biggest highlights is when he kidnaps one of the corrupt cops that was at the scene of the kidnapping, a guy by the name of Jorge. Despite the guy trying to act like a big shot, bragging he was powerful because he was part of La Hermandad, Creasy couldn't give a shit less, simply hacking his fingers off one by one. A terrifying detail is how calm and collected Creasy is during the scene. He's never screaming or acting out of rage. He's so used to doing this kind of thing, he simply can't express any real emotion during it. It's just work. He's operating off of rage, yes, 100%. It's why he gets downright nasty during the torture at times, even hacking off Jorge's ear for annoying him, but the character is able to control himself and appears this almost inhuman entity. This actually plays into an aspect of Man on Fire I don't really see many people talk about, the religious aspects. You see, the film has a lot of references to religion. Peta goes to a Catholic school, her father has a shrine for a saint his family prays to, Creasy has a Bible he carries around with him. There's even a scene where Creasy recites a verse to a nun during conversation.
Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good.
Be not overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good. An obvious reference to the fact the nun does not approve of Creasy's job, seeing it as violent and only attracting more violence. She's even surprised Creasy's able to finish the verse and cite where it came from, Romans chapter 12, verse 21.
Romanos capítulo 12, versículo 21.
Even citing a different verse, referring to himself as the sheep that got lost.
I'm the sheep that got lost, Madre.
This is a reference to the parable of lost sheep. For context, the story is about a shepherd guiding a herd of 100 sheep. One gets lost, and the shepherd leaves behind the remaining 99 to go look for this singular sheep. He finds the sheep and rejoices, more so than for the 99 that never got lost. It's a story about redemption, that Christ finds more joy in redeeming a sinner than the ones who don't need repentance. Creasy compares himself to the lost sheep because it's the only real hope he has left, that he can someday find redemption for the things he's done, even if he starts the story convinced he was beyond forgiveness. Now you can see his failed suicide as a literal act of God, this 1,000,000-to-1 result that should not have happened, yet he was still alive. Now, this is the obvious stuff, but there's another connection you may not know about. You see, there's more than a few comparisons between Creasy and the character of Samson. Samson's a character from the Bible that was well known for his strength. A lot of his stories revolve around his strength and getting justice for wrongdoings, though this can end up with stories telling more about the dangers of retaliation and the cycle of vengeance. Since one of his most famous stories is when his bride-to-be was married off in secret to a Philistine. Her father refused to allow Samson to see her, so he burned their fields. This ends up causing the Philistines to murder his wife and her father, which leads to yet more retaliation by Samson, killing enough of them to cause a whole army to march to the tribe of Judah, essentially the old world Israelites, and demanding the Judahites hand over Samson. He gives himself up willingly, then breaks free and kills more Philistines. You get the idea. Samson kills a lot of people. Well, his story ends with him being captured and enslaved by the Philistines, tortured and weakened, even offered up as a sacrifice to the temple of Dagon, an ancient Syrian god. Samson prays to God, who returns his strength, and he tears down the temple with his bare hands, collapsing the whole building and killing everyone inside, including himself. Well, the actual story of Man on Fire isn't, as exact as the biblical story of Samson for obvious reasons. There are comparisons you can find. A story about a feared warrior that's beaten down and asks God for strength during the worst ordeal of his life. Hell, after the kidnapping, there's an emphasis put on the fact Creasy was severely wounded, shot several times and dealing with constant bleeding. In the 87 film, he's always walking with a limp. Even if he didn't choose revenge, he could have dropped dead numerous times, only kept on his feet by sheer stubbornness and something keeping him alive long enough to get the job done. Religion is a through line you can see in the film all over the place, acting as this interesting spice, while the novel and 87 movie don't ever really dip into this territory. Hell, you can see it as the reason why Creasy dies at the end of the movie. He is Samson collapsing the temple that was the Sanchez brothers' criminal empire, along with La Hermandad, dying in the process, since as a result of Creasy's rampage, the feds are able to track down Daniel, killing him during the raid on his compound, and more than likely Aurelio as well. Creasy dies knowing he was able to save his soul, Pita, and taking down the Philistines. Hell, there's even a pretty on-the-nose reference to it in the alternate ending, with Creasy smuggling a bomb into the car the gangsters are using and detonating it, killing what's left of Daniel's men along with his brother. But the theatrical simply lets Creasy bleed out, something I actually do feel is more fitting tone-wise. Creasy finished his fight. Pita was safe and the feds have all they needed to track down Daniel. His role was done and he earned his redemption. So simply let him die in peace, right off into the sunset in his own way. It also doubles the emotional impact, hell, it triples it. My family and I can't watch that bridge scene without feeling a sledgehammer to the chest. It just hits hard. Because it's so slow and understated, you're able to peacefully sink into what's going on with the music playing, all that. It's just a great sequence. Man on Fire is a gritty, relentless action thriller, full of violence and carnage. It's also a genuinely beautiful story of a man who overcomes his troubles and realizes he can do one good thing in his life, to reunite this girl with her mother, even if he dies trying. I much prefer this ending over any other version. Yeah, it's sad that Creasy dies, but I love it so much because it's sad, because it feels like a well-earned payoff to this character. He didn't want to fight anymore. He shouldn't be dragged into any more violence. And having his death contrast this girl being given a chance to live is just poetic. Even if he didn't think he was going to die in the car, he still went knowing he could have suffered, at the mercy of these violent men that would make him scream in agony. He had no idea that Miguel was watching him and would eventually track down Daniel to kill him. Creasy went fully thinking he would simply be tortured to death. He willingly chose this, all so Pita could be safe. It's gut-wrenching in all the right ways. The novel is a fun read, even if the ending is bleak. The 87 movie is a solid action thriller, but I will forever love the 2004 movie to pieces. It's something I will always recommend to anyone I can. It's something you need to watch at some point in your life. I can't guarantee you'll like it. The ending can throw some people off, and a few I've even recommended it to have said it was boring. But this is one of those films that just plain simple clicks with me. It's a wonderful film that just works. A gut-wrenching story about revenge and redemption, of what people are capable of doing to each other and for each other. It's a perfectly balanced tale of pure hatred and genuine love, something that really makes it stand out among the other revenge thriller movies out there. Everything about it's just well made. You can tell there's a lot of love and care put into this film. Hell, it's one of the few ones out there that actually makes me cry. I'm not even kidding. I consider myself pretty stoic to a lot of movies. I can appreciate a well-made one, but anything that pushes that line to fall on throat clench and wet eyes, that's rare. This is one of the few exceptions. If you can watch that ending and not feel anything, you simply don't have a soul. Man on Fire is simply a masterpiece in my eyes, and the film managed to build quite a loyal fanbase over the years. It originally came out to a pretty middling reception, not really impressing critics. It made its money back, but it just seemed to come and go after the release. It's only after time went by has been re-examined and managed to receive a lot of resurgence. AJ Quino himself loved the 2004 version, praising how it managed to nail the chemistry between Creasy and Pita and was impressed at how well it was able to adapt the violence from the book. Nowadays, it's considered a slept-on gem, even going on to inspire other revenge thrillers in the genre. I can see Taken as a sort of remix on elements of Man on Fire, being about a former Black Ops agent trying to track down his kidnapped daughter in France, though played more as a straight-up action movie instead of a slow-paced, character-driven thriller. And you have a borderline Korean remake called The Man from Nowhere, which feels very, very similar to Man on Fire. It's something you absolutely need to see. Whether you're really into revenge movies or just movies in general, you will not regret it. But do you know what else you wouldn't regret? Gamer subs, use code TAL at checkout. Use the code. Spooky season starting soon. Use the code for spooky season. Use the code or you get the C4 enema. But with this, it's finally time to dip into Halloween. And you know what that means? Let's get into more spooky territory. I'm feeling that this year should involve a staple to horror, The Living Dead. Until next time, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. See you guys. Hey, loser. Do you want a shirt? Do you want a t-shirt? I have shirts now. Look in the description for a link to a t-shirt you can buy. If you don't buy the t-shirt, I'll kill your family. If you don't buy the t-shirt, I'll poison your dog. If you don't buy the t-shirt, you're going to be the only person in town that does not have a t-shirt. Everyone's going to look at you funny. There's going to be social consequences to not having one of these t-shirts. I'm now making express threats of violence against you if you do not buy my t-shirt. I will call the police, tell them how you're not buying my shirt. They're going to plant crack in your house, and they're going to arrest you and then beat you up in a jail cell. Buy my shirt.